What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
Nozomi Hayase is the author of Wikileaks, The Global Fourth Estate, History is Happening, which recounts the rise of the whistleblowing site since its public prominence in 2010 and its subsequent years of publishing. From the clash with the US State Department and the prosecution of Julian Assange to controversies surround the publication of the John Podesta emails, this book traces the challenges that Wikileaks has faced in its mission to bring the First Amendment to the world. Nozomi is trained as a liberation psychologist, deeply steeped in the tradition of depth psychology, humanetics, and phenomenology. She's a frequent guest at Kaiser Report and writer for the Bitcoin magazine. Nozomi, welcome to the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Sure. I'm super excited to talk to you. Kind of what we were talking about before the show is, I came across you in January, and these topics that you've written on were so interesting to me, and I was hoping to be able to speak right away. But when I looked at how much you've written and the depth of your articles in your book, I really need more time to center up for this conversation. So it's great to have you here. I guess to start off, what is a liberation psychologist?
Okay, so liberation psychology is one that was created by Spanish Jesuit priest Ignacio Martin Barro, and he lived in El Salvador, but he studied psychology in Chicago in the USA. And when he actually went back to El Salvador and tried to apply his knowledge to what he learned to understand his people down there, he recognized that psychology that he learned in the West doesn't quite explain or is not going to help his people. So he kind of started to recognize that dominant, mainstream psychology, kind of promotes a certain kind of universality, of universal view of man that is very much one-sided, and try to apply that to understand everyone, basically. So liberation psychology is in many ways, it's a revolt against this mainstream psychology, revolt against this orthodoxy knowledge of psychology that try to define people based on the statistical norm of man. So that's kind of like the basic background of how liberation psychology has been developed. But how I see it is that, in every kind of disciplines, whether it's engineering or chemistry or biology, there is a central dogma in these studies in science. And the psychology, of course, has also central dogma. And for psychology, it's a kind of way of looking at men based on the behaviorism or a reductionist approach that trying to kind of denies that there is something innate within us. That each person is born with this unique individual character, but instead that we are born here being completely blank, so that there have to be a society or external forces that would mold us into becoming who we should be. So that central dogma of kind of a rejection of individuality, rejection of kind of what gives us dignity as humans. So that was the central dogma, and then liberation psychology basically said, wait a minute, that's not what human being is. Human beings means that we have dignity, we have freedom, that we are, each person has this something unique, something that cannot be reduced to being labeled, cannot be reduced to be defined or fixed. So that's kind of, I would say liberation psychologists are rebelliant, dissident who, quite could not fit in to the discourse of the mainstream psychology. And that's kind of like how I kind of found resonance with Bitcoin community, as a matter of fact, because Bitcoiners really challenged the status quo and they try to think outside of the box. And then I find that, liberation psychology, me studying liberation psychology really helped me, prepared me to understand Bitcoin and be a part of Bitcoin community in a sense.
Yeah, it sounds like liberation psychology is the psychosis of Bitcoin, or the ethos of it. I kind of want to explore it more. One of the reasons I kind of really want to get more into psychology and what you've learned in your background and experience is because it seems like knowledge of psychology can be used to move public opinion.
Definitely. And I don't know if if you're familiar with Edward Bernays and what he created. He's understood as a father of public relations, and he created the what we now understand as propaganda. Are you familiar with Edward Bernays?
No.
He is actually he studied. He's a Sigmund Freud's nephew, and Sigmund Freud is a well-known psychoanalyst, the depth psychologist. He was a teacher of Carl Jung, for instance. And Freud, right?
Yes.
And you have heard of Sigmund Freud.
Yes.
So
yes.
Edward Bernays, studied his uncle's theory of the unconscious. So that there's, Freud put forward this idea that there is something that we don't know, that there's a part of us that is unknown to us. And he termed that as unconscious, right? So, and because that part of ourselves, is unconscious desires, the impulses, the things that motivate us, and when that material, so to speak, is not known to us, then, by people studying about it and trying to understand it, they can maybe manipulate, they can use that unconscious desires to make people to act in a certain way. So Edward Bernays basically studied Sigmund Freud's theory of unconscious and then applied that knowledge to create public relations, the mechanism of public relations. And then, he successfully, example of application of this is, he worked with tobacco companies, for instance, and then made women smoke, or, kind of promoted that smoking is a cool thing. And and women who didn't have any inclination to drink, to smoke were kind of, manipulated into smoking. And then that this mechanism of PR, of course, is used to promote war. So it became a big part of politics, basically, how politicians use that mechanism to make, not only, make citizens to vote for the candidates that they want, but also basically engineer and manufacture public consent, making them to consent to something that they would be against if they're informed well. So it's kind of like a manipulation tactics in a very sophisticated way. So that's kind of.
Sure. I kind of want to dig a little bit into, go back to 2010 in April. There was a typical spring day in San Francisco. The world we knew was about to change. Wikileaks published Collateral Murder. And I'd like to discuss that within the framework of the effects WikiLeaks has had on the stadium of democracy. And and how that video changed things for the internet and for
obviously,
democracy.
Okay, so many of us know WikiLeaks, or got to know about WikiLeaks in 2010 when WikiLeaks published the material, the Collateral Murder video. And before then, the organization was really unknown. Nobody knew about it, right? But what was amazing is that WikiLeaks was able to actually reveal, expose this classified military video that depicted the U.S. military gunning down innocent civilians, including children and Reuters journalists, right? And that video, that raw material, was kept secret because the U.S. government classified it And then Reuters journalists actually tried to obtain the material by using Freedom of Information Act, and it was denied. And then it was only by WikiLeaks releasing the material in 2010 that we were able to actually see what has happened on that crucial day. And it was very shocking. I mean, it was very sensational. I mean, it's because I was in US at that time, and this was the time that I think for American public, since the Vietnam War, that I think American people have not seen the real, the raw image of war, what war looks like, right? And as I understand, because I was not born, but as I understand, during 60s, during Vietnam War, that American public was still able to see, dead soldiers coming back from Vietnam, and so because the media wasn't quite censored at that time, this was kind of shocking. I think it really sensationalized public and it shocked American people, and it was a global phenomena because WikiLeaks released the material on the internet, and so that of course journalists were very excited about this publication because WikiLeaks was able to publish materials that no other media have ever done. All the media have ever, more than, they have published more materials than all the media have combined, right? But for me, as an ordinary person looking in, really that publication changed my life because I recognized the power of the internet. That WikiLeaks really demonstrated, in revolutionary power with the internet, and that if it is unleashed, if this power of the internet is brought to the hands of ordinary people, what it can do. And of course, it was not just this publication, but the effect of the publication, how WikiLeaks disclosure empowered the people around the world, and it sparked a global uprising, from Tunisia, Egypt, Spanish, Indigenado movement, and of course, as you probably experienced, you were part of it too, the Occupy movement in the United States. And then we had, this was the largest social movement ever, right, in the US. And it was kind of like global. So then, that really profoundly changed me. And at that time, I was studying liberation psychology. And then, and wanted to kind of find a way to use knowledge of liberation psychology to promote social change at the time. And then when I saw WikiLeaks, this sensational debut, and what it did in terms of, WikiLeaks as a cultural phenomena, that kind of made me, almost wanted to quit studying, being in academia, just leave academia and want to be a part of this, internet culture, so to speak. So from that time, I basically wanted to understand what makes WikiLeaks resilient. How could this organization be able to do what it did? So that kind of led me to study Julian Assange's philosophy, and it led me to the philosophy of cypherpunks.
Sure. I'd love to hear more about Julian Assange's philosophy. I remember growing up in the first Gulf War, and aiding or supporting your point earlier was that we did see a lot of imagery from the war. I remember coming home from school every day, and we saw a lot of footage from the war, but it was to support what you were saying. It was very clean. Everything was one shot blowing up a building with no collateral damage. No one getting hurt. Everything was looked like a video game. And I almost think that was used to manipulate us into thinking that war had no victims or innocent losses or damage. And I contrast that with what we learned, I guess, through Collateral Murder in that video. Yeah. But I don't know a lot about Julian Assange's philosophy.
But I wanted to actually add this something, because the term collateral damage, right? That's actually is a euphemism used to kind of soften up and then to think that, okay, if we call dead people as innocent civilians being killed, for instance, right? The dead body of innocent civilians, that would kind of evoke some feelings that we would feel like, oh, okay, people are dying, right? But if you call them as collateral damage, then somehow like it doesn't, it's kind of softened up. Makes us be numb, right? And it conceals, the language conceals the real reality. So I think that what Julian did, Julian, of course, released the authentic Who material that has not been altered or anything, right? It's authenticated the real material. And because, that he believes that because he released the material in fully, entirely, that he has, he can engage in some kind of editorial, artistic kind of editorial spin on the title. So that's why he terms as collateral damage, collateral murder. And so that was, I mean, that's true, right? If you look at it, it's murder. We cannot ever call, have you watched the collateral murder video?
If I did, it was a long time, like around 2010 or 2011, if I did.
How did you feel like? Did you feel like, I mean, that did it do something to you?
I mean, the whole notion of this nation state fighting wars overseas for generations sickens me in so many ways. This wasn't so much eye-opening for me in terms of, wow, this is happening. It was, wow, someone pierced the bubble and was able to share the video. And in a lot of ways, the key was the way they edited the video, both the footage, but also how they described the video, titled the video. It's instrumental in everything. And that to me was the pen's mightier than the sword. So it was,
exactly right.
But what I've been confounded by, and I haven't gone down the rabbit hole so much because I don't know if there's a truth machine here, but I feel like I don't know if Julian Assange or Wikileaks is a publisher. I don't know if it's a state level actor in the sense that it's supported by another state. I don't know if it's a fourth estate level actor where it's its own state and it's taking on states. And I wonder if this is all altruistic and whether any of that matters. But the fact that Julian is not anonymous or didn't go undercover.
Exactly, right.
And
I think that, this low, uncensored low image of modern war, that it's provided by WikiLeaks. And I could say, during Vietnam War that, famous, this Vietnamese napalm girl, the girl who was basically bombed, right? And she was running naked. And that, I think that picture alone, the one picture had changed the public sentiment at that time. Because, people, at this point, people have to recognize that their government war is killing innocent children, right? So, and I think that at that time when WikiLeaks came to public limelight with the publication, many people immediately kind of, some celebrated the publication and they were like calling Julian the hero, right? But while other people at the same time were kind of skeptical, like saying, okay, what is this? This organization, we never heard of this organization. And is this kind of some kind of subversive organization that's trying to undermine the US military power or whatever, right? So, and that came from actually US soldiers. Many of the US soldiers kind of turned against whistleblower Churchill Manning. But what's interesting is that WikiLeaks is a transnational organization. And it's basically composed of a network of people around the world, activists, journalists, and then now lawyers around the world are being a part of Julian's legal team, trying to help Julian free. But so you see new network of new transnational network, right? And then so this is an interesting phenomenon in some ways and I always looked at the WikiLeaks as cultural phenomena and not just the WikiLeaks as a journalistic organization, not just its significance is in changing the media landscape, but the significance of WikiLeaks it actually goes much deeper. And And then that's actually relates to Bitcoin as well, because Bitcoin is a global network. It's a stateless currency, and WikiLeaks is also stateless journalism. So anyway, yeah, so I find definitely that these two are closely linked.
Yeah. And all this, just to preface, like, I don't think of you as speaking for WikiLeaks. I'm just asking your opinion, and I love hearing all this. So I'm kind of curious, how resilient do you think WikiLeaks is today?
Today? Well, okay, so here's the, I think for me, I came to kind of understand over the years, initially when WikiLeaks, started to publish material and was able to kind of challenge the US government, US empire. And so early on, really, everybody kind of, I think, who was following the organization felt like, wow, this organization is very, very powerful, and was somehow it's very resilient to state oppression or any kind of external forces that try to shut down, right? But what I realized that it's the network. It's the network around the organization. It's a decentralized network built around this organization. That this WikiLeaks is not just like technology or just the one organization that does magic, but it's the people around the world that they are the ones who are committed to values of social justice, values of freedom, and defending civil liberties, civil rights, basic civil rights, and these the people's commitment, and of course not to forget to mention conscience of whistleblowers. So for me, that that network of contagious courage, I think that's kind of how I use it, like contagious courage. I still believe in that, the courage, network of contagious courage. And then if we organize and use technology, whether that is Bitcoin or whether that is, WikiLeaks as a kind of organization built on certain technology, can actually still defend freedom. But, I now realize that after Julian has been prosecuted and then he is now, he still remains in prison. And of course, the US government can't do anything to basically to punish anybody who challenges the US empire. So, and WikiLeaks has not been publishing. That's the fact. After Julian has been imprisoned, has been prosecuted, the WikiLeaks published 2 or 3, I think, released 2 or 3 publications. But after that, the resources and focus have been kind of given to free Julian. So I think right now, WikiLeaks as a model, I think that there need to be some kind of a reworking. And then for me, Bitcoin actually as a technology, and then the people around Bitcoin would actually carry on what Julian wanted to do. And what Julian actually wanted to do was to create a world in which there is no WikiLeaks, that we don't need to have organization like WikiLeaks. So if we have transparent government, right? If we have government that acts honest, we don't need WikiLeaks. We don't need whistleblowers to come forward and, take risk and expose government secrecy when there is no secrecy, right? So I think that, for me, I think it's like we have to now change the way we think about the world, and the WikiLeaks kind of in a kind of a strange way, I think is I think WikiLeaks is an effort to kind of fix the problems of institutional hierarchies. And the way they wanted to fix is they wanted to fight with those in power. They wanted to speak truth to power. They wanted to expose their secret, and they wanted to, change the system, right? And I think that Bitcoin brings a new paradigm in which that we no longer have to fight we no longer have to speak truth to power because, there is no power in the decentralized network. And that's something that I had to learn once I started to get into Bitcoin. This was something I personally have to learn, and I personally have to let go of all the mentalities of doing activism. And so does it make sense?
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting. I've been reading through your work. You even quoted Orwell and said, in a time of universal deceit, speaking truth to power is a revolutionary act.
Right.
And I think a lot of what you're talking about, this melds with what WikiLeaks was doing as a network and as an idea, and what Bitcoin is doing as revolutionary money in this time of universal deceit. And I'm kind of wondering, how does money and the type of money we use affect our reality?
I think money is kind of essential, because I think what we have now, and I like your podcast name, actually, the Bitcoin Matrix. And Bitcoiners kind of use the metaphors of the Matrix, right? The film Matrix, with Keanu Reeves being the main actor, and they always kind of have a reference to it, red pill and blue pill and the things. But I think, I personally think that the film, Wachowski siblings, the film, The Matrix, was not a science fiction. I see that as a documentary. I think they, Wachowski siblings, were able to actually depict and let us see how the world works right now. And we live in this debt slavery, the slavery system, and then money play an important part to enforce this system of control. And then right now, the money is being controlled by basically central banks around the world and professional economists, who don't have any interest for ordinary people. They have their own agendas, and they are the ones who basically control. And then central banks print infinite money that they just create money out of thin air. And then how the money is now used is basically to create a deception, right? So to maintain this system of control. So I think the only way that we can actually change this matrix is to change the money, to make the money be honest, make money be one that is not controlled by anyone, and which is Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is not controlled by anyone, and it is controlled by everyone at the same time. So that's the only way. And unless we fix the problem of this money being used as a tool for control, we cannot really bring about social justice, or we don't have freedom. We cannot do anything, basically. So this is one thing that I learned also, after, writing about WikiLeaks for the last decade, basically, is that, okay, so Julian had this idea, that governments, or conspiracy of governance, the essay that he has written in 2006, and in which he analyzed the, authoritarian regime, and basically the patronage network of governments and corporations. It's not just the government, but also private sectors, corporations being involved, and that they use deception, they use secrecy and deception and information restriction to sustain their collaborative secrecy, right? Which, Julian basically defined it as conspiracy as governance. And then for him, the solution was to expose the secrecy, right? And what I came to understand was that, so, okay, WikiLeaks exposed secrecy. WikiLeaks let us see what our governments are doing, and, help us to actually penetrate into this deception. But then what's next? And to me, it's that part, that, okay, of course, when you reveal the secret, when you challenge the US empire, of course, they're going to attack you. They're going to fight back, right? They're going to chase after you. They're going to shut down, anybody who basically trying to challenge the US empire, right? And so we didn't have, I think, plan B, okay, plan A was to release. Okay, so what's next? So I think the Bitcoin provides the concrete ways that, okay, to carry on where I think Wikileaks left off, that now we can actually create our own network of trust and live under our own rules, and that we can make their system obsolete, right? Because if we don't have an alternative, if we don't have a tool to create alternative, we cannot really exit the matrix. We still are held in this, debt slavery system. And the financial incentives are set against us. So no matter how we try to defend our freedom, no matter how much, we try to defend the values that we believe in, right? Our financial incentives are set against us, then it's almost like the fish trying to swim against the current, and how hard it is, right? And no matter how much people are dedicated, and I worked with very dedicated activists, they do anything. They're hardworking people, but at the end of the day, they cannot pay the bills. They have to go to work and then be a part of military industrial complex. They have to, their tax money is used to fund wars and things like that. So, so I think that Bitcoin for me does give us more concrete tool.
Yeah. Do you think? I mean, it seems like what you're getting at is that in the current system of deceit, we're not able to really connect to our instincts.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
And how do you think Bitcoin or adopting Bitcoin affects our connection to reality and maybe natural law?
Right. I mean, that's a very good question that you have, because, this is one thing I started to recognize. I mean, not just from my personal experience, but looking at the Bitcoin, community, or Bitcoin, how people interact on Twitter, for instance, right? And then now there's this talk about Bitcoin pleb culture, and how the ordinary people are being empowered, and there's that recognition that the Bitcoiners are kind of maybe different in some ways, that they're started to kind of they are starting to share their own experience of how Bitcoin changed them, and that and then what I came to realize is that our system, so let's call it the system that we live in, this Fiat system, the matrix, okay? So because it's really the matrix. So that what matrix does is it kind of disconnects us from our own instinct, right? So that make us actually trust external authorities, whether they're banks, politicians, or professors, doctors, we are made to kind of trust them. And somehow we are told that they know more than you do, right? So you have to go to doctor to have him check your body and then tell us, what's wrong with our body. So then, of course, I mean, we can use expert knowledge, right? But then it got to the point where we completely trust doctors that we don't even know, how we feel. Like we are the only one, those of us who are connected to our body know when something is wrong with us, then what's wrong with us. We have this intuitive knowing. And then somehow I think that what happened is that this, the matrix system that created hierarchical systems, and then, that's actually very much prevalent in academia as well, the higher education. And then what I recognize is that people who go through higher education, like myself, I got PhD, they are actually more disconnected from our their own instinct, including myself. Like I have to kind of come to terms with that, because we were kind of taught to we were taught, I think early on, we were taught that we don't know, we have no ways to validate our experience. We have no way to know truth, that we have to look up to authority outside, right? And so that system, the system that we have, this matrix system, disconnects us from the instinct. And what Bitcoin does is that it connects us with our own instincts. because of the fact that the Bitcoin is actually a part of nature and is deeply connected. I think the Bitcoin is a technology that find a way to reconnect, reconnect money with its own roots, which is nature, part of nature, I think. And so that's the one important thing. And what I found interesting is that the intuition, that we all have intuition, or whether that is like some kind of a gut feeling, like, I'm sure you had an experience where, when you something is wrong, right? Like somebody tells you a lie, and then, but your mind quite cannot understand, like, okay, this person seems to be a nice person, and he seems to be trustworthy. Yet I feel somewhere like, I can't trust this person, right? And how many times do we actually override this innate instinct and then, just go with what we think is right?
Yeah.
And then it turned out always trusting our own instincts always help us, because our body, like gut feeling that tells us or knows something that our mind cannot quite understand. So yeah, very much I think it's the Bitcoin distorts actually our connection to the instinct, and also the Fiat culture disconnected from the instinct. And then this is actually, I think, carefully engineered. I think it was a carefully engineered system that they know that, if somehow the people who run this system know that if they were able to disconnect us from instinct, that they somehow can, control us, and that, they can actually maintain their power.
Right.
And I think that's why the people in Bitcoin network, that they are more kind of, I think, become aware or started to kind of question, I think, that this mainstream narratives, that come from the establishment about the solution to the pandemic, that for instance, that this initiative foreshadowed by the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum, for instance, they use certain language, right? Like, I don't know if you are following this, but are you kind of following what they're up to?
Yeah, but I do have questions for you about it. So I'd love to hear you, about transhumanism. I think I'd love to hear you define what that is and what they're looking to do there, and how that fits in. And I'm also curious, just along the lines of what we were just talking about, as a culture, did we trade our authenticity for acceptance?
Well, definitely. Exactly. I mean, that's just, again, going back to our disconnection to our own instinct. And then again, the double speak, I actually have to refer to the Orwell's double speak. And then remember, like, Orwell's 1984, in his novel, he talks about double speak and, the war is peace and ignorance and strength, and right.
Yeah.
And so it's just the language that conceals our reality, the use of language that deceive us, right? So and then again, going back to the WikiLeaks publication of the collateral matter, and it was the real images. When real images are brought to us, then each person was able to actually connect to the real image, the uncensored reality, right? Instead of like the journalists or politicians, or the military officers telling us what reality is, that each person can have immediate, the uncensored, direct connection to experience. And that was the power that I think WikiLeaks brought. And then how this real law, the real experience, authentic experience, has been covered up was by the use of euphemism, such as collateral damage, right? So, and I think that, so that's just one thing. So, and then, if you look at the global reset, what they're doing, that they also use the kind of euphemism that they use the language of destroying harmony with nature. And then we have to, create a sustainable future, just and humane and sustainable future. And then if you just only look at the language and then just, what's up on on their website, because their website has a whole description about what they're up to. It's not like they're hiding. And if you just look at it on the surface, it looks good. It looks like so much like a utopic, that they're talking about, restoring harmony with nature and, having the sustainable future and combating climate change and everything sounds great, equality and liberty for all the people. But again, it's the euphemism. It's the how they are using language to deceive us. And what's interesting is, I think Bitcoin actually does that without kind of talking about doing this PR, how Bitcoin restores our society, our connection to nature and stuff like that. But Bitcoin actually does what global reset initiatives claim that they are going to do. Bitcoin, of course, is a technology created by cypherpunks, and cypherpunks' motto is cypherpunks write code. They don't engage in PR. They don't tell us what to do and stuff. They just simply write code. So, that's again the difference that, and then what I find is what's happening is it's really the humanity now is being attacked. I think what it makes us human has been kind of attacked by, certain sector of humanity, I say, and then they are the one who actually use the fake word. They use deception as a means to, deceive us. And so then we just because when we are disconnected from our reality, then we are actually not connecting to the real world. We are interacting with the artificial world, and that's how I and when I look at it, it's that we are actually living in a very artificial world. And I think in 2017 or so, when I first kind of started to become interested in, actually in 2016, when I became interested in this idea of transhumanism, and it was my neighbor actually had this book titled kind of Pandemic. Actually, it was interesting. The book titled Pandemic, and then it was about transhumanism. And I, before that, he gave it to me, and before that, I kind of heard about it, but then I wasn't really paying attention to it. And when I kind of read that book, I was like, oh my goodness, is this now happening? So I kind of started to really pay attention to this agenda of transhumanism. But then around that time in 2016, I remember seeing the article in which Elon Musk said something about he believes that we are living in a simulation, right? And then I thought, wow, that's a crazy idea. Like, okay, so we are kind of inside of somehow like living in this kind of a virtual reality or simulation, and that's not real reality, or, but certainly like something that made me think about, what is real. And like the Matrix question, Neo had this question of what is real, right? And so the Fiat system basically disconnects us from real reality, the real world, the uncensored world, unmediated world. And the unmediated world, which I could maybe define it as natural world, natural world or universe, or, whatever people call it, right? And that, this world has been basically kind of kept out from us. And the trusted third parties, banks, financial institutions, politicians and teachers, they are the gatekeepers, basically. They kind of create this patronage network to prevent us from actually entering into this uncensored real world, and somehow, and then they make us kind of interact with one another in this artificially created world, like simulation, right? And then this whole world is basically it's being controlled, and then we have we are told that we are free, but then this is very much conditioned the freedom. The freedom that we have is illusion, because we are actually domesticated. We become like domesticated animals, and then we were told, like I don't know if you know. Behaviorist, the psychologist B.F. Skinner, Do you know him? If you study psychology a little bit, then everybody have to learn B.F. Skinner.
Oh,
yeah.
But I don't remember, but.
B.F. Skinner, which, I mean, I really hated him when I was studying. Like, we joked around that instead of calling him B.F. Skinner, it's a B.S. Skinner, he's such a B.S. But, he had this idea that, human behaviors can be understood through, experimenting on rats and pigeons. And what he came up with is this famous invention, is Skinner's box. And then he, put rat in a box, in a maze, and then he creates electric shock and then see how rats respond. And then, then that learns over time that if you go to, certain direction, then you get electrified. So then they would avoid, pain. So they would change their behavior, right? So that was that he kind of trying to look at how rats behave to kind of understand human behavior. And then to understand human behavior is one thing, but I think what he went wrong, tremendously wrong, is to try to apply that knowledge to control human behavior. So that's, I think, a wrong, ethically wrong use of psychological knowledge, in my opinion. And so this, as I see it, it's this matrix that we live in is kind of like a Skinner's box. And then it's not just the people who control this are not just the bankers or politicians, the psychologists are involved in this, the psychological knowledge is used to control humans, used to domesticate humans. And then like you pointed out, the first thing is to basically compromise our instinct. And, if you look at natural world, if you look at animals, all the animals, they know when they're in danger, and then they know what to do because they can, they follow their instinct, right? And humans are only ones that kind of, I think, our mind kind of can override our instinct and then make us not to kind of follow instinct. So this matrix system is created in a way that make us, kind of make us act against our instinct and act against our self-interest, basically.
Well, I didn't mean to cut you off.
What?
I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. And the transhumanism, this is the idea basically that trying to reinvent humans. I think from my perspective, as I understand it, it's almost like they wanted to reinvent humans in the image of a machine. So they want us to kind of become like robot, or for us to migrate into the cyberspace, and we kind of forever lives on the internet, and that we disconnect ourselves from our body and social connections, and we become kind of part of, basically like rats, in Skinner's box. And what they do is that I think the defining feature of transhumanism is they believe that the humans, so-called transhumanists, who work with this idea, that they believe that humans can evolve, human can be advanced more than what we are now. So we could kind of become superhuman. I mean, in from their perspective, superhuman meaning like transcending the old kind of human attributes, and they consider disease, death, and certain emotions like sadness, or to be kind of negative, something negative that we can eradicate. We humans, superhumans, or once you elevate yourself to the transhuman states, then we don't experience sadness, we don't experience disease. We could be, forever happy. So that's kind of, and they are trying to use technology to create this kind of new species, so to speak, and then I think what's important to me is, for me, what I found troubling is that how this transhumanism agenda have been, carried on without people really knowing about it. I don't think that the people who are politically engaged, and informed, that many of them don't actually know what that is. And then actually there is this plan, and the World Economic Forum's chairperson, Klaus Schwab, he's a well-known transhumanist, and as I researched more into their initiatives, that it's become clear that their agenda is really that they want to create the post-human future, the future that doesn't, in which we have no humanity, basically. So I think that what's important is, I think we need to start having conversation about what makes us human. What are the important attributes that makes us human? Do we want to become kind of being that doesn't feel, only experience certain emotions and not be able to experience the fullness of emotions? I mean, if we take away what we consider to be, mistakes or, errors or sadness or, unhappiness or what does that mean to us, right? I don't, some people might say, oh yeah, I want to live in the kind of state that I could be only happy. But that's like, you become like a robot, right? If you don't experience, range of emotions, and if you're kind of almost like reprogrammed into kind of, to feel in a certain way, think in a certain way, then you become automaton. So that's something that I'm very concerned, and I think that the people around the Bitcoin actually could, the network built around the Bitcoin could actually start asking this question, and then more actively engaged in this process of where our society is going.
Yeah, I have so many questions here. One, you mentioned Aaron McCullum's 2013 book, The Pandemic, and in it he describes transhumanists' aim to synthetically evolve the human race more rapidly than organic evolution allows, and to create post-human civilization, also referred to as Human 2.0. So my first question is this even possible, do you think? Or is this just Frankenstein stuff?
No, I think it's possible. It is possible. And as I said, and it happens in a very discreet, in a way that we don't recognize. I think many of us don't recognize. And then again, going back to this, how we are cut off from our instinct, right? And I think there are actually, okay, I'm gonna get into a little bit esoteric domain here, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I studied, of course, Carl Jung, and Carl Jung kind of get into this. I mean, it goes deeper than what Freud discovered. Freud discovered the unconscious, and Jung actually went deeper than that. And the one thing that he came up with is that he found the phenomena he termed synchronicity. And I don't know if you are familiar with that synchronicity, but that synchronicity is basically is a way to kind of describe the related incident that cannot be explained through causality, right? It's the incident. It's kind of like a meaningful coincidence. That's kind of like how we understand it, but it's not cannot be. It's not in a linear sense of like cause and effect. Because I did this, and that's why this caused. I created this action A, and then action A created action B. So it's not like that. It's a causal link, a causal relationship, and the things that happen simultaneously. So actually, his concept of synchronicity really challenged the conventional view of physics, and the Einstein's view of kind of relativity, for instance, and more the Jung's idea is more kind of tapping into the discovery of quantum physics, actually, and what I found interesting is there are forces that cannot be explained and are rejected by modern science. Okay, and these are things like synchronicity, magic, miracle, the things that we cannot quite explain, right? And And in our world, this matrix system that we live in, it's based on this kind of a mechanical universe. Like the universe is like works like a machine. It's like we live in this mechanical machine, and then linear timeline, and then it kind of like so if you create this stimulus, then it triggers certain response, and then what they want to do, people who believe in this mechanistic view of the universe, I mean, which I think to some degree it's true. I think it's depending on where in your, what level of consciousness that you exist in, that I think that changes the understanding of the universe. So the old theories that are out there, Einstein's relativity or quantum physics, they all are valid, I think, all are true, pointing to some kind of true reality, truth about how we experience the world. But it's also the different kind of principles work depending on the level of our consciousness. And in that, so the the matrix system basically eliminates anything that cannot be explained by modern science. And then it created, in my opinion, it's created artificial, the artificial experience, artificial reality. And that we get to the point where we don't even know, like I think many people who live in the cities, that they don't even know they live on the earth. They are so disconnected from natural world and they are, walking through this large buildings that they somehow think that they live in the city. They are cut off from this, the real natural environment, right? And then, so what they are trying to do, I think the transhumanists, trying to do is they wanted to cut us off forever from these forces that cannot be explained by this mechanical universe, basically. And then they want to, so then they can control us completely. And then once our consciousness is what's taken over, then yeah, we actually start to exist in a different universe in some ways. And then I think that it's kind of, I believe that actually we now kind of have two different networks. The humanity is now forking off, they are like spreading off into at least two, two networks. And then one is of course represented by the Common Trust Network, the global reset initiatives that they are working to create this Common Trust Network. And then they are gonna have vaccine certificate, digital vaccine certificate, and then they're going to use this central bank's digital currency. And then what they want to do is that they want to keep track of everybody's behaviors, transaction, and everything. And then they are going to use the technology, biometrics, biosensor technology to kind of really, connect our bodies and connect us to their network, right? And then they are actually calling that as the common network. And but on the other hand, that we have Bitcoin network, and that is, I think it represents something different. And I think from my perspective, Bitcoin's network is facilitating or human-led organic evolution. And then for that, what that means is basically we would have a direct connection to the universe, direct connection to natural world, and we would have uncensored, peer-to-peer relationship. And, so that kind of I think that we have this contrasted two networks. And this is actually this contrasting network is something that I became kind of aware of and become, felt that it's very important for me to articulate how they are different. And that recognition of these two networks, contrasting networks, didn't come just with Bitcoin, me studying about Bitcoin, but it came earlier when I was researching about Wikileaks, because Wikileaks is, as I said earlier, is what is around Wikileaks, is a decentralized network of ordinary people, activists, journalists, hackers, and, cryptographers and lawyers, people around the world that they are actually working together. And for the value of freedom of speech that they believe in. And what was interesting is, I don't know if you're familiar with the story of Edward Snowden, that when Edward Snowden released the NSA documents and he went to Hong Kong, right, to escape. And then WikiLeaks investigative journalist at that time, Sarah Harrison, she was sent to kind of rescue Edward Snowden. So she went to Hong Kong to help Ed move out of Hong Kong, and they actually ended up in Russia unintentionally. That Russia was supposed to be the transit, and then they wanted to go to actually South America, but United States canceled Edward Snowden's passport, so they got stuck in Moscow. But what happened was, what's interesting is, there is a story that I find it magnificent, was that, okay, so Edward Snowden was in Hong Kong, and the US government already kind of trying to hunt him down, and they charged Edward Snowden under Espionage Act. And at that time, there was this short window of time that Edward Snowden was ever be able to escape from this, overreaching hand of the United States of government. And the U.S. government, at a crucial moment, they made a mistake. They misspelled Edward Snowden's middle name, and that gave them some time for them to escape, right? So there was some kind of the force. I think I recognize that there is a force to help them out of there, and some person people might say, oh, that's just a coincidence. Or that's just accident, or they would maybe dismiss. But for me, it's no. This help, or this something that happened that helped them. That gave them some time. This was significant. This was something like the force that modern science cannot explain. Maybe miracle, grace. All of those things, right? So that force is always working through us, right? But we are disconnected from it because we were taught not to believe in it. We are taught, first of all, to think that there is no such forces. And we have to actually somehow exist within this small box of Skinner box. And then that's, what you see outside is all you can see, and you have to depend on the government. You cannot grow your own food. You have to buy them at the grocery store. You have to go to see a doctor. Everything is just within this small box. And then we are, disconnected from whole infinite possibilities that exist out there, and that that we can actually connect with one another and then find solutions that are not offered by the system, right? So so I think that so if that makes sense.
That made a lot of sense, and it just raised so many questions for me. Especially along the lines of, this common trust network, which I'll acknowledge and stipulate, and the Skinner, the BS Skinner, rats in the box, right?
Right.
And the Matrix. And what it makes me think of is, I was consumed with trying to find the truth and the signals and the real reality externalities outside the box, and trying to understand what's going on with Assange and Snowden and Ross, and all these issues, Russia, China, their involvement in those individual issues and those broader networks and issues. And then I think about how, I think they have control over the Matrix. And,
right, exactly.
And my assumption there is, when I hear about like new technology, like say deep fakes, right? My assumption there is that the military has probably been working on this for 20 years before we hear about it, and that they've probably perfected it for 5 years before they even tease it in the news, so that they can kind of pre-message things and sort of control the box, control the matrix. And so my issue is, whenever I go try to figure out what's going on with Assange or Snowden, and how did he end up in Russia, and what did we learn about this? And I wonder, is this truly a signal, like you were saying, and you have to go to your gut, but is this a signal of truth? Or is this the Matrix trying to manipulate me and soften me to them spying on me? And maybe they want me to know about this, or and it could be even little details within a broader thing. So maybe Snowden's one thing, but maybe his enemies release a detail that's true or not, that I might hear, that might skew my thinking. And so with Bitcoin, I really just was able to release all of that and almost give up on that mystery and intrigue, because there was so much intrigue to it, because it was just fascinating. And you want to find revolution, and you want to find justice, you want to find truth. And it became so difficult. And Bitcoin almost just set me free from all of that.
Right.
So exactly. I can almost be a little bit more of a spectator and not think my life depended on finding truth there.
Right, and I think that the one thing that I also recognized after, being deeply involved in the effort to free Julian and help his legal situation for the over the decade basically, was that my experience has been kind of very oppressive and disempowering, very disempowering experience, because of the fact that here we are taught to kind of believe in democracy, right? That there is the systems of checks and the balance of power, and many activists were made to believe that there is this system of accountability, and then all we have to do is that we have to demand politicians, we have to have this human rights campaigns and make politicians to act, for our interests. And then we did that. I think I did that. For a long time I believed in this, especially this U.S. Constitution has this, great mechanism of system of checks and the balance of power. But then I realized, when the system itself has been taken over by those in power, the judicial branch and the executive branch, everything is just taken over by them. So then there is no, justice system, right? The judges are paid, they're bought by those in power, and then they don't have any judicial, real judicial autonomy to actually, to really judge whether the situation is just or not. And then of course the money is already corrupted, so that they have, those in power have infinite amount of resources to corrupt more, the legal systems or media or whatever, right? So then, I couldn't just go with this idea of, you work hard, you just try everything you can to, bring accountability and really speak to these politicians and engage in this campaign. I didn't think that was really realistic. And I, believe me, I have done a lot of work. And then what I realized after being so deeply engaged in this effort was that, in this system, we don't have power. We are basically living this, pretense of democracy, and that democracy become like it's a charade, and it's a system of control, part of the system of control, including electoral politics, basically. And then we were given kind of an illusion of freedom, so that's why we kind of start to getting involved but in this we were spectator, and we are being made to be a spectator, and not only being spectators, somewhat, if you are not careful, you become useful idiots, basically, that those in power can use you as a way to kind of create civil war, create division among us, among ordinary people, and then all the kind of things that the film Matrix, as we saw, how the Agent Smith multiplies, and then there was this explanation that if you are not unplugged from the system, you are part of them, right? So basically, there is no nobody is not neutral in the system. If you are not awake like Neo, then you are part of the Matrix. You are helping Agent Smith, So so then I realized that, okay, so in this, that ordinary people don't have the power to write their own script. We are made to just carry on the narratives that are imposed upon us, and in those narratives, even the most maybe empowering narratives that we can get within that storyline that they create is activists who are fighting, the heroes, who are fighting against this. So that's all we can have. But then the destiny of the character, destiny of hero is always, is to be, met with assassination, being imprisoned, and it's never be a happy ending, because of the fact it's those who control the history, basically those who control money, they are the one who write the story and give us narratives, right? So then here is the thing is that Bitcoin enlightened me, actually, is that Bitcoin allows us to actually not be a spectator. And then here it's again connected to the discovery of quantum physics, for instance. And in the quantum physics, there is this idea that there is this effect that the observers actually can change the reality. So it's not like the objective reality is out there that is completely absolute and fixed, right? There isn't like this objective reality that, okay, this is the objective one that, that stands outside of me, separated from me. No, the quantum physics tells us it's how you perceive your consciousness actually play a part in, creating a reality that you observe. So then the way to actually change, society, or way to change your situation that you are in, it's not trying to change what is outside, but to try to change our consciousness. So that is a huge, I think, for me, paradigm shift, give me a huge paradigm shift. And then Bitcoin really facilitated for me to understand this, is that Bitcoin, people say often like Bitcoin doesn't care who you are, Bitcoin doesn't really, and I think it's true that Bitcoin give us kind of power to, or reminded us of the power, our own power of a kind of consciousness, our power as creator, that we are the one who actually create. We have ability to create narratives, right? And then become the kind of person that we wish to, see in the world, and then interact with one another and create a kind of new world, I think. And so it doesn't matter. Like one hand, I have this, I looked at news and the news tells me one thing. And then like you're saying about maybe the Snowden disclosure, I have heard that from other people as well, that okay, maybe Snowden wanted us to know about this spying because then we would be fearful that we know that, we kind of,
self-censor.
Right, self-censoring and things like that, right? And so that was kind of a maybe intentional release or leak, and we can all speculate, what is right and what is wrong with limited information perhaps, and we might never be able to understand what is true, right? But for me, the Bitcoin actually kind of taught me that it really doesn't matter what's happening outside. I mean, we can use it as a reference point that, okay, this is kind of what's happening outside, but we don't allow what is happening outside to dictate our own reality. And that recognizing that we are the one, our consciousness actually has power to shape the world, shape the reality that we want to see. And that, it really doesn't matter whatever it is happening. What matters is, that each moment, I think that we can actually focus on, being existing as one that we would like to. And I think for me, as someone who is deeply into Bitcoin network, is this idea of individual sovereignty, and that's very important to me. And so that I when I now come across news, then I would before I kind of deeply engaged with it and allow that piece of information to define my reality, I would actually disengage myself from that and then say, okay, this is one perspective being projected out there, and and then what I want. I would ask myself, what kind of world that I want to be a part of, right? Do I want to be a part of a world in which that there is this injustice or wars, and then you have to kind of somehow stop it? Or do you want to kind of contribute into creating a world that is peaceful and humane? So each time I think that, for me, I mean, this is something that changed me profoundly, that I now I try to live without any stories, identities, and that, to keep that kind of a space for choice that I would choose, like each moment that I would choose, the kind of reality that we want to be a part of. I know it's kind of a little esoteric, but
No, I think it's
important thing is that I think Bitcoin brought a huge paradigm shift that, the world, what we have, that this matrix system is the world constructed through the creed of objectivity, constructed through the scientific creed of objectivity, which is actually not true objectivity at all. It's filled with subjective agendas and things, but they call it as objective, And so that world, out there, that is, that make us believe that it's objective real world, and which is not the case. And then Bitcoin kind of allow us to restore our connection to subjectivity and say, if we don't like what we see outside, then we have a choice to opt out. We don't have to be a part of it. And then it is true. It is, I think, true in a concrete sense as well, because people who now enter into Bitcoin network, they can actually opt out from, being a part of Fiat system if they want to, right? Of course, it takes a lot of effort now, but that you can actually live right now without ever being a part of, maybe Fiat system if you want to, right?
Yeah.
Then, Bitcoin created, choice, basically. Do you want to be a part of this system? The system that, basically the system that tells us what is reality for us, instead of us deciding what is reality and then using our creative power to participate in defining what is real, being a part of, defining what is real, and become an author of our own stories. That's the Bitcoin paradigm. And the Fiat paradigm is basically the one that you're part of, you're part of the characters of our story, as like those global leaders, that they are the authors, and they write their own stories, and then they impose roles on us, and then we simply accept the reality that is handed down to us. And then that the whole mechanism of verification of the reality is through their institution of modern journalism and central banks and everything. And then they say, oh, this is objective news, this is objective money, and when it's not,
Yeah. I have it's interesting. I really feel that listening to what we've been talking about, that like it further reinforces that for me. I think Bitcoin is this battle of freedom that's personal and individual, and that humans have forked. And in a weird way, there's always going to be this exchange rate between Bitcoiners and non-Bitcoiners in terms of reality and their experience of reality. And I'm kind of looking forward to this tipping point where we're all back on the same chain, or the same time chain. And I don't know if we ever get there. And one of my questions for you is, especially with your perspective, your background, your experience, your education, do you think there's more suffering in the world today than 100 or 1,000 years ago? Or is it just, there's more people and therefore we have more people suffering, but from a pro rata standpoint, suffering has always been part of human existence, and there's always been control mechanisms? Or is it getting worse for humanity?
I don't know, but I think it's kind of worse for humanity now. And I kind of studied the indigenous cultures because somehow I was drawn to understanding Native Americans, for instance, and especially I have kind of connection to Hopi tribe. And what I found interesting was that they had such a autonomous society that they didn't have kind of institutions like they had their own governance, but it's decentralized, and it's not like the institutionalized, and they didn't have these doctors, and they had medicine men who kind of had a different way of approaching health, I guess. But then what's interesting is that they follow their instinct, and then their society isn't complex, and then it's and I don't think that there was so much suffering, that, the one hand, like one would, these people who didn't have any technologies, and how could they live, how they were overcoming disease and all of that stuff, but, from modern person's perspective, but interestingly that they were actually doing well. And in fact, that I heard the story that some white people actually decided to live with Native Americans, and they went into their be a part of their culture and then live there. And then they were asked to come back, and then all of them didn't want to come back. Right? They said, "I'm fine being here. I'm happy." Like all of a sudden, like all depression and my illness and everything is gone, and I'm happy now, right? And then on the other hand, the Native Americans, they were asked to live with white people and be a part of this white culture. And then all of them, they said, "I want to go back." So I mean, that's a kind of interesting thing. And I think now we have media, so we kind of more understand what's happening around the world. So it's I think the human suffering could be amplified. I mean, it's again, if you look at the media, I mean, what kind of consciousness or energies that you get, do you ever feel happy after watching news, evening news, for instance, that they don't really talk about what's happening, the happy things or good things happening in the world, that they like to focus on, kind of problems and things like that, or make us feel fearful, right? And at the end of maybe watching TV, watching evening news, we feel kind of somehow like, oh gosh, there's so much suffering, and then I feel like doomed, as a species, that I cannot do anything, and then wow, I have to be fearful about what's happening. So that's, I think, the effect of this mainstream media, and of course, again, who is controlling mainstream media and what agendas, what for they use the media as a format. Of course, it's to control human consciousness, so that we will have always a fear. Like we would only experience a certain range of emotions, like fear, anxiety, and depression, and things like that. And Bitcoiners, the one thing that I found interesting about Bitcoiners is that, of course, they have certain characteristics that I find interesting. One of it is relentless optimism. They are very optimistic. They are hopeful, and that they even exhibit emit certain energies. And you could. You could just, and then when I go through this Twitter's timeline of my, friends, progressive friends, and they are more focused on political problems, oh God, US invaded Syria, oh my God, again, there's this bomb being dropped, and right, so it's negative incidents that are kind of streaming toward me. And then when I switch back to Bitcoiners timeline, and then of course it's somehow it's more hopeful, like relentless optimism, and then has a so
on that note, do you think everyone has genius level talent?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I would not say that I would not say as genius as, again, it's I think, again, our culture, this matrix control system, basically it's based on starting point is that we are nobody. That's the matrix system tells us you are nobody. So that's why, because you are nobody, because you are a blank slate, so you have to acquire things. You have to go to good university and get a good degree to be respected. You have to have a handsome guy or whatever to become attractive or whatever, all of those kind of signals that they send us, right? For us to improve and for us to become something. And of course, part of this control mechanism is the creation of celebrity culture. And then what they do is that they put forward a certain kind of celebrities, and then highlights the what they are good at, whether they are musicians or painters or whatever, and then those manufactured celebrities, they are elevated, artificially, in my opinion, though, is that, because they were, they were kind of produced, that's maybe a good word, to kind of speak to masses, masses' desires, and then these people are going to follow after them and they worship celebrities. And so within that, there's this, I think that the genius is defined as, you have to become exceptional. You have to, if you're going to play the guitar, you have to become like, Jimi Hendrix. Otherwise, you are not going to make it, or you're not genius, right? Or like you have to sing a song like John Lennon, or, like something like that, But I think for me, genius is, the epistemological word for genius is basically, you are connected with the spirit that you are born with. And if we believe that we all have unique individuality, that everyone has unique individuality, and then everyone, I personally believe that everyone has something called a destiny, soul destiny, some kind of a purpose in life, and once we connect ourselves with it, then we are like the, we are connected with our blueprint, so to speak. And then when we manifest, we all are genius, and everyone is different. Everyone is just simply different. And then once I think we connect ourselves with that, soul destiny or spirit or or unique individuality, I think that we find peace. And when I look back my life, like as example, like I cannot quite understand like how my life has been unfolded, but then there is certain scenes, I meet certain people at a certain time, crucial time, and there's something, like Wikileaks come into my life, at a certain critical time, and all of those things. And then I could like look at it and say, I would not be able to have a planet right, but then there is something consistent, like a thread that lands. And that I could only say it's a destiny, that somehow like I become a part of this, and then I'm supposed to do this and that. And once we align ourselves with it, then I have no kind of desire to want to become someone else. Like I don't compare myself with other people. Other people might have more money, or other people might be more famous, or have great skills than I do, or whatever. But I'm content with my own life, I'm content with my own, destiny. And then, so I think that's the culture I think we are moving toward, I think, with Bitcoin, that is decentralized, and that allows everyone to blossom into their own personhood.
Right. Yeah, can you describe maybe how Bitcoin aligns incentives around self-interest?
So, this is another interesting thing that I found, is that when I started to, again, get into the matrix as the control system, this Fiat system, is that, the Fiat system basically, I'm only talking about Fiat system because always it's helpful to kind of compare, Bitcoin with the Fiat system to understand, the how Bitcoin works. So in the Fiat system, for instance, the self-interest are concentrated in a few hands. So it's we live, the matrix system is hierarchically organized. So those who are on the top, right, that they actually can act out of their self-interest. And then as a matter of fact, that's all they do. They are always acting out of self-interest. And then while they are connected and acting out of their own self-interest, they tell rest of us, ordinary people, that it's not good for us to act out of self-interest, right? So then, and then the way they do this, and I don't know if they actually coordinate this, or it's just happened to be, the sectors with different interests, self-interest coming in to do this, I'm not sure. But what's interesting is that religion is used as a primal tool to actually send us a message to control our behavior. And then, what's interesting is that, okay, I wasn't grown up with Christianity at all, but I have some Christian friends. So I asked my Christian friends, so, you grew up as Catholic, for instance, and in Bible, did Jesus ever say the importance of self-interest? Did Jesus say like, it's good for us to love ourselves? Did he ever say that, right? And then all of my friends actually, who are very kind of, deeply into Christianity, they say, no, the only thing that, Jesus said was, love thyself as you, love the other as you love yourself, right? So that's the only kind of maybe a process that Jesus said, that kind of pointing to the self-love. But then again, it's the emphasis was given to loving as a person. So what I found interesting is, okay, in Bible or the Christianity or the structure of religion, at least the one that is very much propagated, promoted, I think, and maybe there are different interpretations that I don't know, but the ones that is mainly promoted is this idea of, okay, you have to love your father, you have to love your God, right? So then love your God and love your neighbor. But in that, okay, where is love yourself? Because if you don't love yourself first, how can you love God? How can you love the another person, right? It's kind of like the, when you have to first love yourself in order to be able to actually share, your love with another person. So what I found interesting is, so this matrix system, basically, it's kind of created a system where those who run this system, they are selfish and they are actually acting out of their self-interest, but then they camouflage the fact, they always use double speak so that the people don't really know how selfish they are, right? So then they could act as, I am a politician who really care about my constituent, or I am, humanitarian, person that I want to bomb other country for humanitarian, aid or whatever, right? We don't really know. Many people really don't know what they actually do. And then there is constantly, the ordinary people are constantly bombarded with the message of, you have to be nice to the other person. You have to sacrifice another person, you have to help other person. You have to help the poor. You have to, And where is that self-love? And somehow I think that we have created a system that we are, actively act against our self-interest, to the point that we can't, if we were to act out of our self-interest, somehow our culture tells us you are selfish. How can you act, selfishly? But wait a second, I'm not acting selfishly. And selfishly in the sense that you say, I am acting out of my self-interest, which is very important. That's the foundation, that's the biological foundation for all species, all the creatures. In the natural world, they of course, try to preserve their life, and only humans that could go against our interests, our our instinct, right? Again. So what Bitcoin does for me is that if you look at the incentive, of course, and Satoshi's, I think, great contribution was to somehow, brought the self-interest back to the network, so that, to tell everyone it's okay, it's okay for you to act out of self-interest, and then actually, the Nick Szabo's essay, the sharing out the origin of money, in that, I think that was a really, I think that his essay, I personally think it's as important as Bitcoin white paper. And in that essay, he kind of traced back he used studied the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins' idea, which he termed the selfish genes. But his book, Richard Dawkins' book, Selfish Genes, is actually contrary to the title, The Selfish Gene. It's all about altruism, and how, that we need, the gene, at the gene level, that genes are programmed to preserve their lives, but out of which that we can actually build the altruistic, we can create altruistic human beings. So I think, so one thing that Satoshi did was really to recognize, self-interest is important. And somehow, by using the method of decentralization, he found a way to distribute the right to act out of self-interest, so that it's no longer be concentrated on the top, you see. Right. And that, the concentration of self-interest on the top in this Fiat system is actually very much, it's the problem that we face. And that's why I think that the activists and socialistic, socialists, they try to challenge that self-interest, right? Who became aware of that, that they try to challenge. But that's just the one part of, they're not seeing the whole thing, in my opinion, because we have to first claim our right to act out of self-interest.
Yeah. Speaking of claiming our right, are corporations the new kings with their own fiefdoms? And will Bitcoin defeat or win this battle for the internet and freedom? Or is it sort of an individual battle, and these things might coexist for a really long time?
You know, this is it's a good question. And, you know, as I said, I see Bitcoin as a part of cypherpunks battle for freedom of internet. But, you know, I use the term battle, but I think that, you know, the best way to describe this is Bitcoin is actually the battle that we already have won. So, you know, all we have to do to some degree is that we can kind of sit back and relax, you know. I mean, to some degree, you know, not you know, completely, but I think that it's Bitcoin. Basically, what Bitcoin does is Bitcoin preserves choice, you know, basically. So because what's happening is right now, as I said, that the humanity is forking off. You know, they are kind of, you know, we are kind of going into the two networks. And that the one, you know, represented by the global reset folks, I think that what they do is that they wanted to coerce, you know, they use deception, you know, using double speak and then using economic forces as a mean to coerce people, so that the people are, you know, either they are willing to participate because they are deceived and they are not informed. And then, of course, this message of you are doing it for other people, you know, you cannot be selfish and you have to be a part of, you know, combating climate change, or you have to be selfless, you know, to help other people. And so, you know, if you buy into the narrative, then, you know, you be kind of sucked into that system, thinking that you are actually doing something righteous, in my opinion, right? So that's like the way maybe some people might be sucked into this network that is facilitated by the global reset initiatives. But another thing is the economic coercion, as I said, so that there will be economic pressures that people don't even have a choice. Let's say, you know, if you don't accept to be a part of this network, and if I don't accept the central bank's digital currency, then I lose my job. You know, I lose my livelihood. So even though it's against my will, I have to be a part of it, right? So that could be the second one. And what Bitcoin offers is Bitcoin basically offers a choice, saying, you know, no, there is a choice that if you really want to be, if you don't want to be a part of their system, then there is an alternative, and then this is, you know, the way you can do it. So I think the battle is, I think it's a different kind of battle, and you know, and this actually the battle has been one of the major themes in my life since I was young, and I read when I was I think at the 5th grade, I read C.S. Lewis' book Chronicle of Narnia. Are you familiar with the book?
You know, I did the press junket for the movie, but no, I didn't read the book or see the movie.
So Chronicle of Narnia is basically, it's the, you know, the Aslan, the lion, you know, the lion, there's a mythical world, mythical land called Narnia, right? And then the 4 children, they went into this mythical land called Narnia through the wardrobe. And then the Narnia, this land had been taken over by White Witch, and then so they have always winter without Christmas, and it's interesting that, you know, so what happened is that they're going to engage in this battle. They trying to kind of free the land of Narnia from witch, right? This evil witch, and then so the C.S. Lewis has the 7 chronicles that I think the first one I read was the Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, I think, and then the last one ended with the title, Last Battle, which I find it interesting because as a child, I read all of them, all 6 actually, except the last one. So for some reason, I didn't get to read the last one, you know, that is titled as The Last Battle. So, and then in 2017, I had a time to read the last one. So I, you know, finally read. And then before I read the last one, and knowing the title, I always thought that, okay, this story of Chronicle of Narnia, you know, the battle between people, you know, that I kind of as a child felt like I will become a part of this battle, you know, this moral battle. And somehow when I found Wikileaks, I found the battle, like this is it. This is the battle, you know, this is what I saw in the Chronicle of Narnia, you know. I'm part of freeing the effort to free Narnia, land of Narnia. But so in 2017, for some reason I didn't read the last one. So I always thought that it's the last battle, that this idea of last battle kind of hovers in my mind. And then in 2017, when I read it, I was stunned because I was expecting this huge battle. But then what I found was it was just a lion, the Aslan, named Aslan. Instead of battle, fighting against the witch, what happened was the Aslan brought the door, this huge door, and then let all of his creatures just go through the door. And then the old world of Narnia, the Narnia that has been controlled by this evil witch, it just dissipated. It's just dissolved. And then the world is reborn, and then there is new Narnia. And I was stunned because I thought that it's going to be a big battle between the two, and then there will be a bloodshed, and the people die and stuff like that, animal dies. But then in fact, on the contrary, once just a door, and a door to exit. That's it. Just go through it, just exit, simple thing, just open the door, just get through it. And then I saw that, okay, Bitcoin is that, and of course that, when you go through the door, you have to go through the purification, like, not everyone can go through it. And that's, again, like going back to the Matrix metaphor of, when Morpheus showed Neo, this famous red or blue pill, and he said that I can only show you the door, but you have to walk through it, right? So I think that I'm often kind of tempted to see it as a battle and kind of expect to fight and stuff. But I think ultimately it's Bitcoin is a battle that we already have won, and all what we need to do is just choose. That's it. Yeah. And for me, I just wanted to articulate clearly these two choices so that people are informed about these choices, and they are not going to be, deceived into becoming a part of the system that they don't want to be a part of.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Just walk through the door. There'll be no bloodshed except for buying blood on the streets during the dips. Right. Yeah. But I do want to read. You cited a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. Regarding the pathology of the corporate state. And I'll read this right before my last question for you. Martin Luther King Jr. saw the injustice and oppression of society, and all his life he fought against it. He pointed out how our society itself has become ill, and he said he is proud to be maladjusted to the injustice of society happening in his time. End quote. Modern psychology has a word that is probably used more than any other word in modern psychology. It is the word maladjustus. Modern psychology has a word that is probably used more than any other word in modern psychology. It is the word maladjusted. This word is the ringing cry to modern child psychology. Certainly, we all want to avoid the maladjusted life. In order to have real adjustment within our personalities, we all want the well-adjusted life in order to avoid neurosis, schizophrenic personalities. But I say to you, my friends, as I move to my conclusion, there are certain things in our nation and in the world which I am proud to be maladjusted, and which I hope all men of goodwill will be maladjusted until the good societies realize. I say very honestly that I never intend to become adjusted to segregation and discrimination. I never intend to become adjusted to religious bigotry. I never intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few. I never intend to adjust myself to the madness of militarism, to self-defeating effects of physical violence. So my last question to you is, as a liberation psychologist, can you liberate yourself from Bitcoin?
Oh, that's an interesting question. But first of all, thank you for reading this beautiful quote from Martin Luther King. I think he really, this quote really sums up, I think, the situation that we live in, and how we actually are, maladjusted to the culture that is pathological, so it is very insightful. So yeah, thank you for, bring this up and share here. But yeah, I think that, can you liberate from Bitcoin? That's I think that I've been thinking about this for a long time, and, and I'm reminded of the fact actually, that Bitcoin is a technology, and technology remains to be a tool. It's never be something that we give our power to. So what is most important, I think, what is really significant is who we are, us as humans. And the Bitcoin, as Paul Tudor Jones, the hedge fund manager, billionaire hedge fund manager, said the betting on Bitcoin is betting on human ingenuity. And I think he really tapped into the spirit of Bitcoin, really, but I think Bitcoin is, as I see it, Bitcoin is a tool that help humanity, help us liberate ourselves from this matrix system. But it's us who does it, who do it. It's not the technology itself. So that there is this, I think, some cypherpunks, this idea of, just simply deploy the technology out there, and then, then that would disrupt, and then we would have civil liberties or something like that. Or like some, cypherpunks actually, they kind of like, sometimes I wonder if they want to live in the cyberspace and just leave the bodies, so that we somehow like escape into this cyberspace and leaving this off world of, natural world, or, the real world, so to speak. But I think that, again, the cypherpunks battle for freedom of the internet, what is the purpose of it? Why do we have to free the internet? It's for the sake of just to have a free internet so that we can just be free on the internet? Or is there something bigger? And for me, again, I always come back to Julian Assange's philosophy and his idea and what he stood for and fought for and sacrificed his life, is that he looked at internet as fundamentally a tool for emancipation of humanity. So it's a tool to emancipate, the tool to liberate humankind. So it's, again, I think the question of can we liberate ourselves from Bitcoin is really like to recognize Bitcoin as a tool. And then, don't give even our own power to this technology, how much price goes up, or how much the Bitcoin becomes, like accepted and then become mainstream or whatever, but never give our power to this technology and use it as a way to, way to defend what is important to us, which is, I think, who we are as humans. So, and then again, that's, I think, a reminder. I think I want to remind myself of this all the time. So, I guess that me being a part of liberation psychologists, I guess, is not to have any attachment to anything, and any identities or anything, but to always connected with something that is living, something alive, something constantly changing and moving within ourselves. That, the what makes us human, the creative force that actually gave birth to Bitcoin itself, that, to remain connected to that force, I guess. So yeah, I think that's kind of requires a practice and discipline to live in that way, to always be, always remember that, real creative force that is within ourselves.
Yeah. This conversation has been completely fascinating for me. I really recommend people, you have a slew of articles on Bitcoin and freedom and money as a trust-based, money being trust-based. I recommend people definitely check out all your articles. This book to me is fascinating. WikiLeaks, the global fourth estate, history is happening. I really think it should just be called History is Happening, because that's what it really captures for me. And I really like the angles and the things you dive into. I don't think I think WikiLeaks is sort of a platform to explore these topics. And you explore them in a way that is just completely fascinating to me and that I've really enjoyed. I hope to have you on again sometime, but definitely let people know where they could find you, where they could find your articles, your writings, and your book.
Oh, sure. So you can find me, my work on at NozomiHayase.com. That's my name and .com. Or you can always follow me on Twitter, Nozomi Imagine. And I would ask you to maybe put the link on in the description part, the Julian Assange's the official WikiLeaks campaign site that help us understand Julian's situation, legal situation, and ways to free him. So
Sure.
if you don't mind, I would ask you to just put the link.
Yeah, I will definitely. I've been really lazy with links, but I will definitely try to remember to keep that one on. It's definitely an important issue and cause. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I do hope to talk to you again sometime soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nozomi Hayase on how Bitcoin affects our connection to reality, instincts, and natural law right here on the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. And thank you for listening. If you were down in Miami for the conference this past weekend, I hope you had just as incredible time as I did. The highlights are too many to list here, but I'm already looking forward to BitBlock Boom in August. In the meantime, keep learning, keep stacking, keep going, and keep your head on straight, and stay in the game. This one's for keeps. Peace.